Hello there, everyone. I'm WG Ashwood. I'll be your fancy-focused host for this evening. Thank you so much for joining us. Oh wait, hold on. Where's my fireplace? Welcome in, Spice. Welcome in, Lameth. How y'all doing tonight? Happy Monday to you. Happy Martin Luther King Day. We're gonna be reading to you in just a short second as soon as I can get my dang fireplace working. It's here a second ago. There we go. Okay. Oh wait, it was working for a second. Done. Okay. Yeah, now we've got the fireplace working. Sorry about that. I hope I didn't flash any sensitive information on the screen. I think it should have just been my desktop for a little bit there. Yeah, so we've got a crackling fire going. It's a nice cold wintry day out in Louisiana where I am. It's dipping below freezing to the 20s tonight. So we're gonna cozy up by the fire and we're gonna read a little children's book about a bunny Dracula. How does that sound, everybody? I am a bit on fire. It's to help keep everyone warm. Welcome in, Dise. It's wild to you that it's as cold as there as it is here. Oh, it's as it is up north. Yeah, it's polar vortexes are wild apparently. As a note, we are still donating to the Wildlife Recovery Fund to help with the LA wildfires. So any subs, bits, gifts, donations, anything of the sort is going to a portion is going to be set aside for donation. What else do we have? TikTok is back. We are back on TikTok. They got lives back again. We're back over there. Yeah, basically we're very excited to have you here tonight, and we have our hot chocolate. I recommend everybody have a nice enjoyable beverage for themselves. I've got my hot chocolate here. We're gonna be jumping into the story real soon. How is everybody doing tonight? Happy Monday. I hope you had a good day, as good a day as you could have had. We had the day off of work. We're off work tomorrow because of the storm. I say that because we've never gotten actual, like, we've gotten snow, but this is allegedly supposed to be like all hands on deck winter levels, like in the north level snowstorm. So, or it could be nothing. I could wake up tomorrow and it'd be just dewy as normal, because I don't trust the calendar man, the winter man, the meteorologist. So we're just gonna sit back and enjoy tonight, though, where it's gonna be nice and freezing, and we're gonna sit back with a just don't drive and it'll be okay. I have all of my appointments for tomorrow canceled. So, and I went and I got muffin fixing, so in the morning I'm gonna make muffins. There's no need for me to go anywhere. So I will be staying home staying warm. Hey, Squiz, welcome in. We're gonna be reading Bunnicula tonight. This is what y'all donated for. We're just about to get started. I can't really put it off much longer. Unless anybody has any objections, we'll go ahead and get started on the story. But I'm a little nervous. I haven't read to anybody in a little while. I mean, I basically read to y'all ever since the Stardew days, and maybe even before that, did I start reading you all the dialogue. So I don't know why I should be nervous of this. We'll just go ahead and jump in. I don't want to. I'm very excited to do the Bunny Dracula voice. But I need to like tamp that down because I know that the regular narrator is Harold the dog. So this is Bunnicula. It's the story of a family adopting a rabbit that may or may not be a vampire. It is told from the perspective of Harold the dog, and we're gonna do great. Thank you very much. I shall never forget the first time I laid these now tired old eyes on our visitor. I had been left home by the family with the admonition to take care of the house until they returned. That's something they always say to me when they go out. Take care of the house, Harold. You're the watchdog. I think it's their way of making up for not taking me with them. As if I wanted to go anyway. Can't lie down at the movies and still see the screen. People think you're being impolite if you fall asleep and start to snore or scratch yourself in public. No thank you. I'd rather be stretched out on my favorite rug in front of a nice, whistling radiator. But I digress. I was talking about that first night. Well, it was cold. The rain was pelting the windows. The wind was howling. It felt pretty good to be indoors. I was lying on the rug with my head on my paws, just staring absently at the front door. My friend Chester was curled up on the brown velvet armchair, which years ago he'd staked out as his own. I saw that once again he'd covered the whole seat with his cat hair, and I chuckled to myself, picturing the scene tomorrow. Next to grasshoppers, there's nothing that frightens Chester more than the vacuum cleaner. In the midst of this reverie, I heard a car pull into the driveway. I didn't even bother to get up and see who it was. I knew it had to be my family, the Monroes, since it was just about time for the movie to be over. After a moment, the front door flew open. There they stood in the doorway, Toby and Pete and Mom and Dad and Monroe. There was a flash of lightning, and in its glare I noticed that Mr. Monroe was carrying a little bundle. A bundle with tiny glistening eyes. Pete and Toby bounded into the room, both talking at the top of their lungs. Toby shouted, "Put him over there, Dad!" This is the illustration. Very nice. This, you can see the little bundle with the beady eyes right there as the lightning flashes. This is Harold the dog and Chester the cat. "Take your boots off, you're soaking wet," replied his mother, somewhat calmly, I thought, under the circumstances. "But Mom, what about the—" "First stop dripping on the carpet." "Would somebody like to take this?" asked Mr. Monroe, indicating the bundle with the eyes. "I'd like to remove my coat." "I will," Pete yelled. "No, I will," said Toby. "I found him." "You'll drop him." "I will not. You will too. Mom, Pete punched me." "I'll take him," said Mrs. Monroe. "Take off your coats this minute." But she became so involved in helping the boys out of their coats that she didn't take him at all. My tranquil evening had been destroyed, and no one had even said hello to me. I whimpered to remind them that I was there. "Harold!" cried Toby. "Guess what happened to me?" And then, all over again, everyone started talking at once. At this point, I feel I must explain something. In our family, everyone treats everyone else with great respect for his or her intelligence. That goes for the animals as well as the people. Everything that happens to them is explained to us. It's never been just, "Good boy, Harold," or "Use the litter box, Chester," at our house. Oh no. With us, it's, "Hey, Harold, Dad got a raise Hey, Harold, Dad got a raise, and now we're in a higher tax bracket." Or, "Come sit on the bed, Chester. Watch this Wild Kingdom show. Maybe you'll see a relative." Which shows just how thoughtful they are. But after all, Mr. Monroe is a college professor, and Miss Monroe is a lawyer. So we think of it as a rather special household. And we are, therefore, rather special pets. so it wasn't at all surprising to me that they took the time to explain the strange circumstances surrounding the arrival of the little bundle with the glistening eyes now among us. It seems that they had arrived at the theater late, and rather than trip over the feet of the audience already seated, they decided to sit in the last row, which was empty. They tiptoed in and sat down very quietly, so they wouldn't disturb anyone. Suddenly, Toby, who's the little one, sprang up from his chair and squealed that he had sat on something. Mr. Monroe told him to stop making a fuss and move to another seat, but in an unusual display of independence, Toby said he wanted to see just what it was he had sat on. An usher came over to their row to shush them, and Mr. Monroe borrowed his flashlight. What they found on Toby's chair was the little blanketed bundle that was now sitting on Mr. Monroe's lap. They now unwrapped the blanket, and there in the center was a tiny black and white rabbit, sitting in a shoebox filled with dirt. A piece of paper had been tied to his neck with a ribbon. There were words on the paper, but the Monroes were unable to decipher them because they were in a totally unfamiliar language. I moved closer for a better look. Now, most people might call me a mongrel, but I have some pretty fancy bloodlines running through these veins, and Russian Wolfhound happens to be one of them. Because my family got around a lot, I was able to recognize the language as an obscure dialect of the Carpathian mountain region. Roughly translated, it read, "Take good care of my baby." But I couldn't tell if it was a note from a bereaved mother or a piece of Romanian sheet music. The little guy was shivering from fear and cold. It was decided that Mr. Monroe and the boys would make a house for him out of an old crate and some heavy-duty wire mesh from the garage. For the night, the boys would make a bed for him in the shoebox. Toby and Pete ran outside to find the crate, and Miss Monroe went to the kitchen to get him some milk and lettuce. Mr. Monroe sat down, a dazed expression in his eyes, as if he were wondering how he came to be sitting in his own living room in a wet raincoat with a strange bunny on his lap. I signaled to Chester, and the two of us casually moseyed over to the corner of the room. We looked at each other. "Well, what do you think?" I asked. "I don't think rabbits like milk," he answered. Chester and I were unable to continue our conversation because a deafening crash commanded our attention. Pete yelled from the hallway, "Ma, Toby broke the rabbit's house!" "I didn't, I just dropped it. Pete won't let me carry it." "It's too big, Toby's too little." "I am not." "You are too." "Okay, fellas," Ms. Monroe called out as she entered with the milk and the lettuce. "Let's try to get it in here with as little hysteria as possible, please." Chester turned to me and said under his breath, "That lettuce looks repulsive, but if there's any milk left, I get it." I certainly wasn't going to argue with him. I'm a waterman myself. At that moment, the crate arrived, barely standing the strain of being pulled in two directions at once. "Ma, Toby says he's going to keep the rabbit in his room. That's not fair. Harold sleeps in his room." Only sometimes, I thought, when I know he's got a leftover ham sandwich in his drawer. Toby's a nice kid, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't hurt that he shares his stash with me. It was, after all, at one of those late-night parties in Toby's room that I first developed my taste for chocolate cake. Toby, noting my preference, has kept me in a chocolate cake ever since. It's kept me in chocolate cake ever since. Interesting. You appreciate that we have dark mode on? Yeah, it's honestly how it loaded up, so I think it's just the natural level. Hey JLo, welcome in. We're reading Bunnicula. Also, welcome in everybody who's joined us so far. We're just getting started with the Bunnicula reading. Also, yeah, don't feed your dogs chocolate cake. What is going on here? Pull up by the fire. We're just getting started with the story. And Toby, noting my preference, has kept me in chocolate cake ever since. Pete, on the other hand, doesn't believe in sharing. And the only time I tried to sleep on his bed, he rolled over on me and pinned me by my ears so that I couldn't move for the rest of the night. I had a crick in my neck for days. "But he's mine," Toby said. "I found him." "You sat on him, you mean?" "I found him and he's sleeping in my room." "You can keep smelly old Harold in your room, and Chester too, if you want to, but I'm gonna keep the rabbit in mine." Smelly old Harold. I would have bitten his ankle, but I knew he hadn't changed his socks for a week. Smelly indeed. Mr. Monroe spoke up. I think the best place for the rabbit is here in the living room, on that table by the window. It's light there, and he'll get lots of fresh air. Pete's taller than I am, Toby cried. He'll be able to see the rabbit better. Too bad, Squirt. Okay, said Miss Monroe through clenched teeth. Let's put him to bed and make him comfortable, and then we can all get some sleep. Why? Pete asked. I don't want to go to sleep. Miss Monroe smiled a little too sweetly at Pete. Look, Ma, said Toby. He's not drinking his milk. Chester nudged me in the ribs. Didn't I tell you? He asked. Excuse me while I make myself available. Hey, said Toby. We gotta name him. Can't that wait until tomorrow? Asked Mr. Monroe. The boys shouted in unison. No, he has to have a name right now. I have to say I agreed with them. It took them 3 days to name me. Those were the 3 most anxious days of my life. I couldn't sleep at all, worrying that they were really going to call me Fluffy, as Miss Monroe had suggested. Well, all right, said Miss Monroe. What about, say, Bun Bun? Oh, there she goes again, I thought. Where does she get them? Yeah, we all said. Well, then, how about Fluffy? She offered hopefully. Pete looked at his mother and smiled. You never give up, do you, Ma? Meanwhile, Chester, who had also been named Fluffy for a short time, was rubbing against Miss Monroe's ankles and purring loudly. No, Chester, not right now, she said, pushing him aside. He wants to help us name him, don't you, Chester? Toby asked as he scooped him up into his arms. Chester shot me a look. I could tell this was not what he had in mind. Miss Magpie, welcome in. Thank you for the follow. And I see we got a hydrate from Dicey. Please pull up next to the fire and enjoy some hot chocolate while we read Bunnicula. Come on, Harold, Toby called. You've got to help with the name, too. I joined this family, and serious thinking began. We all peered into the box. It was the first time I had really seen him. So this is a rabbit, I thought. Sort of looks like Chester, only he's got longer ears and a shorter tail. Motor in his nose. Well, said Peter after a moment, since we found him at the movies, why don't we call him Mr. Johnson? There was a moment of silence. Who's Mr. Johnson? Asked Toby. The guy who owns the movie theater, Pete answered. No one seemed to like the idea. How about Prince? Said Mr. Monroe. Dad, said Toby, are you kidding? Well, I had a dog named Prince once, he replied lamely. Prince, I thought. That's a silly name for a dog. We found him at a Dracula movie. Let's call him Dracula, Toby said. That's a stupid name, said Pete. No, it's not. And anyway, I found him, so I should get to name him. Mom, you're not going to let him name him, are you? That's favoritism, and I'll be traumatized if you do. Miss Monroe looked in wonder at Pete. Please, Mom, please, Dad, let's name him Dracula, cried Toby. Please, please, please. And with each please, he squeezed Chester a little harder. Miss Monroe picked up the bowl of milk and moved toward the kitchen. Chester followed her every movement with his eyes, which now seemed to be popping out of his head. When she reached the kitchen door, she turned back and said, Let's not have any more arguments. We'll compromise. He's a bunny, and we found him at a Dracula movie, so we'll call him Bunnicula. Bunnicula. That should make everybody happy, including me. What about me? Muttered Chester. I won't be happy until she puts down that milk. Well, guys, is that okay with you? She asked. Toby and Pete looked at one another, and then at the rabbit. A smile grew on Toby's face. Yeah, Ma, I think that name is just right. Pete shrugged. It's okay, but I get to feed him. Okay, I'm gonna put the milk back... Okay, I'm going to put the milk back in the fridge. Maybe he'll drink it tomorrow. What about Chester? Toby said, dropping the frantic cat to the floor. Maybe he would like it. Chester made a beeline for Miss Monroe and looked up at her plaintively. Oh, Chester doesn't want any more milk, do you, Chester? You've already had your milk today. She reached down, patted Chester on his head, and walked into the kitchen. Chester didn't move. Okay. Sorry. Okay, bedtime, said Mr. Monroe. Good night, Bunnicula, Toby said. Good night, Count Bunnicula, Pete said sarcastically, in what I took to be his attempt at a Transylvania accent. Oh, sorry. Good night, Count Bunnicula, Pete said sarcastically, in what I took to be his attempt at a Transylvanian accent. I may be wrong, but I thought I saw a flicker of movement from the cage. Good night, Harold. Good night, Chester. I licked Toby good night. Good night, smelly Harold. Good night, dumb Chester. I drooled on Pete's foot. Mom, Harold drooled on my foot. Good night, Pete, Miss Monroe said with great finality as she came back into the living room. Then more calmly, Good night, Harold. Good night, Chester. Mr. and Miss Monroe went up the stairs together. You know, dear, Mr. Monroe said, that was very clever, Bunnicula. I could have never thought of a name like that. Oh, I don't know, Robert. She smiled as she put her arm through his. I think Prince is a lovely name, too. The room was quiet. Chester was sitting by the closed kitchen door in a state of shock. Slowly, he turned to me. I wish they had named him Fluffy, was all he said. I feel at this time there are a few things you should know about Chester. He's not your ordinary cat. But then, I'm not your ordinary dog, since an ordinary dog wouldn't be writing this book, would he? Chester came into the house several years ago as a birthday gift for Mr. Monroe, along with 2 volumes of G.K. Chesterton, hence the name Chester, and a first edition of Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities. As a result of this introduction to literature, given the fact that Mr. Monroe is an English professor, Chester developed a taste for reading early in life. I, on the other hand, have developed a taste for books. I found Jonathan Livingston's Seagull particularly delicious. From Chester's kittenhood on, Mr. Monroe has used him as a sounding board for all his student lectures. If Chester doesn't fall asleep when Mr. Monroe is talking, the lecture can be counted as success. Every night when the family is sleeping, Chester goes to the bookshelf, selects his midnight reading, and curls up on his favorite chair. He especially likes mystery stories and tales of horror and the supernatural. As a result, he's developed a very vivid imagination. I'm telling you this because I think it's important for you to know something of Chester's background before I relate to you the story of the events following the arrival of Bunnicula into our home. Let me begin with that first night. It seems that after I went to sleep, Chester, still stewing over the lost milk, settled down with his latest book and attempted to ignore the rumbling in his stomach. The room was dark and quiet. This did not prevent his reading, of course, since, as you know, cats can see in the dark. A shaft of moonlight fell across the rabbit's cage and spilled onto the floor below. The wind and rain had stopped, and, as Chester read Edgar Allan Poe's The Fall of the House of Usher, he became increasingly aware of the eerie stillness that had taken their place. As Chester tells it, he suddenly felt compelled to look at the rabbit. I don't know what came over me, he said to me the next morning, but a cold chill ran down my spine. The little bunny had begun to move for the first time since he had put in the cage. He lifted his tiny nose and inhaled deeply, as if gathering sustenance from the moonlight. He slicked his ears back close to his body, and for the first time, Chester said, I noticed the peculiar marking on his forehead. What had seemed an ordinary black spot between his ears took on a strange V shape, which connected with the big black patch that covered his back and each side of his neck. It looked as if he were wearing a coat. No, more like a cape than a coat. Through the silence had drifted the strains of a remote and exotic music. I'm not going to say that word. I could have sworn it was a violin, Chester told me. I thought perhaps a caravan was passing by, so I ran to the window. I remembered my mother telling me something about caravans when I was a puppy. For the life of me, I couldn't remember that. What's a caravan? I asked, feeling a little stupid. A caravan... A caravan is a band of people traveling through the forest in their wagons, Chester answered. Ah, yes, it was coming back to me now. Station wagons? No, covered wagons! The people travel all through the land setting up camps around great bonfires, doing magical tricks, and sometimes if you cross their palms with a piece of silver, they'll tell your fortune. You mean if I gave them a fork, they'd tell my fortune? I asked breathlessly. Chester looked at me with disdain. Save your silverware, he said. It wasn't a caravan after all. I was disappointed. What was it? I asked. Chester explained that when he looked out the window, he saw Professor Micklewhite, our next-door neighbor, playing the violin in his living room. He listened for a few moments to the haunting melody and sighed with relief. I've really got to stop reading those horror stories late at night, he thought. It's beginning to affect my mind. He yawned and turned to go back to his chair and get some sleep. As he turned, however, he was startled by what he saw. There, in the moonlight, as the music filtered through the air, sat the bunny, his eyes intense and staring, and an unearthly horror about them. Now this is the part you won't believe, Chester said to me, but as I watched, his lips parted in a hideous smile, and where a rabbit's buck teeth should have been, 2 little pointed fangs glistened. I wasn't sure what to make of Chester's story. The way he told it, it set my hair on end. Chapter 3. Some Unusual Goings-On. The next few days passed uneventfully. I was very bored. Our new arrival slept all day, and Chester, whose curiosity had been aroused by the strange behavior of the rabbit that first night, had decided to stay awake every night to observe him. Therefore, he too spent most of his days sleeping, so I had no one to talk to. The evenings weren't much better. Toby and Pete, who used to play with me as soon as they got home from school, now ran immediately to that silly rabbit's cage to play with him. Or at least they tried to. Bunnicula did not make the most energetic playmate. It took him a while to wake up each night, and then when he did awaken, he didn't do much except hop around the living room. He didn't play catch, he didn't fetch, he didn't roll over to get his tummy rubbed. I couldn't understand why they played with him at all. I expect it was because he was new and different, but I was confident that they would soon tire of him and come back to trusty old Harold. Finally, on the morning of the 4th day, I caught Chester bleary-eyed over the water dish. He grumbled at me in a most unpleasant manner. You know, Chester, you were never exactly charming in the morning, but lately you've become downright grumpy. Chester growled in response. What are you doing this for, anyway? What are you looking for? He's just a cute little bunny. Cute little bunny. Chester was amazed at my character analysis. That's what you think. He's a danger to this household and everyone in it. Oh, Chester, I said with an indulgent smile. I think your reading has gone to your head. It's just because I do read that I know what I'm talking about. Well, what are you talking about? I still don't understand. I'm not sure yet, but I know there's something funny about that rabbit. That's why I have to keep alert. Well, look at you. You're exhausted. You sleep all the time. How can you call that alert? I'm awake when it's important. He sleeps all day, so I sleep all day. So just what have you seen that first night that makes you uneasy? Well, said Chester, that is... At this point, Chester started to bathe his tail. Bat his tail. Bathe? Bat? We'll say bat. Chester started to bat his tail, which is a cat's way of changing a subject he finds uncomfortable. He then stumbled sleepily into the living room. So, I asked again, following him, what have you seen? Nothing, he snapped, and proceeded to curl up on his chair to go to sleep. After a moment, he opened one eye. That doesn't mean there's nothing to see. For the next few mornings, it was the same routine. I'd be ready for a good romp around the living room, and Chester would go to sleep. Pete and Toby were at school. Mr. Monroe was at the university. He never did too much romping around anyway. Miss Monroe was at her office. No one to play with poor, neglected Harold. At first, I thought I could strike up a friendship with Bunnicula and maybe teach him a few tricks, but I could never wake him up. He was always waking up just about the sunset, when I wanted to take a snooze. A rabbit, I concluded, is cute to look at, but is generally useless, especially as a companion to dogs. So I would retire each day with my favorite shoe to the rug and chew. Now, some people, especially Mr. and Mrs. Monroe, can't understand my taste for shoes and yell at me for snacking on them. But I always say there's no accounting for taste. For instance, I remember one evening when Mr. Monroe picked some of his sour balls out of the bowl by his chair and dropped a green one on the floor. He didn't notice as it rolled across the room and landed near my nose. I decided this was a perfect opportunity to try one for myself. I placed it in my mouth and wished immediately that I hadn't. As the tears started running out of my eyes, I thought, "What's wrong with my mouth? It's turning inside out!" Mr. Monroe immediately noticed that something had happened. "What's the matter, Harold? Are you looking for someone to kiss?" "Help! Help!" I wanted to cry, but all that came out was an ooh sound. I oohed for days. So how can anyone who likes green sour balls criticize me for preferring a nice penny loafer or a bedroom slipper? But back to the matter at hand. One morning, Chester had news. "That bunny," he whispered to me across our food bowls, "got out of its cage last night." "Don't be ridiculous," I said. "How could he break through that wire? Look how little he is." "That's just it. He didn't break through any wire. He got out of his cage without breaking anything, or opening any doors." I looked puzzled, so Chester told me the following story. "Now, Harold," he said, "I don't want you thinking I'm not a good watch cat, but after a few hours last night, I grew curious about the time. I went into the hallway and, you know that new clock they've got? The big one? That goes all the way to the ceiling? Well, it has this thing in the middle called a pendulum. At first, I figured I would just leave it alone. It looked like that spool they tried to on a string and hung... It looked like that spool they tied on a string and hung from the doorknob for me to play with when I was a kitten. Every time I hit that silly spool with my paw, it would swing back and hit me on the nose. I hated that toy. So naturally, when I saw this one, I decided not to have anything to do with it. I checked the time, and it was midnight. It was all set to go back to the living room when something stopped me. "Curiosity?" I ventured. "I suppose you could call it that. I prefer to think of it as the challenge of the unknown. I put one paw over my nose and reached out with the other one and gave it a good old smack. I damn near broke my arm. It's still tender. See how swollen it is?" He showed me his little paw. I couldn't see anything wrong, but I knew better than to argue with him. "Oh yes," I said. "That looks terrible. You must be suffering awfully. You'd better go easy today." He limped dramatically, just far enough to display his new handicap, and continued. "I couldn't even get to the pendulum. Somebody had put glass in front of it. I was pretty mad. I was all set to go back, but at the same time, I couldn't help watching the thing move back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. It was so easy to watch, and before I knew what had happened, I was waking up." "You fell asleep?" I asked incredulously. "I couldn't help it. I didn't even know it had happened. But I looked up at the face of the clock, and it was 12:45. I'd been gone 45 minutes. I ran back into the living room and looked at Bunnicula's cage, and it was empty. I couldn't imagine where he was. Then I noticed a light coming from under the kitchen door. I went into a crouch, stalking the light, when, click, I heard the refrigerator door close, and the light went out." "It must have been Mr. Monroe having his midnight snack," I suggested. "No, that's what I thought. I jumped on my chair, curled up real quick, and kept one eye open, pretending to be asleep. Slowly the door to the kitchen squeaked open. This little head poked out from around the corner and looked to either side to see if the coast was clear. Then, guess who came bouncing out all by himself, with that idiotic grin of his plastered all over his face." "Well, I guess it wasn't Mr. Monroe," I said. "Not unless he wears bunny pajamas and gets very tiny at night." "Bunnicula, huh?" "You got it. Unfortunately, I hadn't positioned myself so that I could see him get back into the cage. I didn't want to let him know that I had seen anything, so I had to stay put. I still don't know how he got out, or back in." At this point, Mr. Monroe came downstairs to make breakfast. I wondered if Chester hadn't dreamed the whole thing. He did admit falling asleep, and as I've said, he has quite an imagination. But I was game. After all, there hadn't been any excitement in this place for days. Chester and I took our positions under the kitchen table. We didn't have long to wait. "Holy cow!" Mr. Monroe yelped as he opened the refrigerator door. He took this funny-looking white thing out of the fridge and held it at arm's length. "Peter, come down here!" "What is that?" I whispered. Beats me, Chester answered. It looks like a white tomato. Very funny, I said as Pete came into the kitchen. Peter, have you been playing with your chemistry set in here? No, Dad, why? I thought this might be one of your experiments. You know what it is? Gee, Dad, it looks like a white tomato. Just then, Ms. Monroe and Toby came in the door. What's all this fuss about? Miss Monroe asked. We were just trying to figure out what this is. Toby pulled it down so he could get a better look. Well, he said, it looks to me like a white tomato. Mr. Monroe took a good look. You know, he said to his wife, it really does look like a white tomato. There's the whole family all together. I guess cutting into the white tomato? There's one way to find out, said Miss Monroe, who always was the practical one. Let's cut it open and see what's inside. Everyone gathered around the table, and I jumped up on a chair in all the excitement. No one noticed that I had my paws on the table, which under normal circumstances was discouraged, to say the least. Chester wasn't so lucky. Chester, get off the table, Miss Monroe said. Chester jumped onto Toby's shoulders, where he stayed to view the proceedings. Miss Monroe took her sharpest knife and cut cleanly through the thing. It fell into two halves. It's a tomato, all right, said Miss Monroe. Here are the seeds. But it's all white, Toby observed. And look, said Pete, it's dry. So it is, Mr. Monroe said as he picked up one of the halves. There's no juice at all. Well, Anne, what do you think? It's gone bad, I guess, though I've never heard of a tomato turning white before. Come on, she said, clearing the table. Let's throw it out and have breakfast. And Harold, get your paws off the table. Rats. Chester jumped down from Toby's shoulder and motioned for me to follow him into the living room. This had better be important, I said. They're cooking bacon. A white tomato. Very significant, Chester murmured. So it's a white tomato, I said, edging my way back to the kitchen door. What does that have to do with Bunnicula? I can tell you one thing, Chester said. I got a good look at the tomato. There were very suspicious marks on the skin. So? I believe they're teeth marks. So? So tonight I'm going to reread a book I read last year. How fascinating, I said as the aroma of frying bacon wafted across my nostrils. And what book might that be? The Mark of the Vampire. What? I stopped dead in my tracks. Meet me tonight after the others have gone to sleep. You'd better take a nap today so you can stay awake. Chester closed his eyes. I shifted my look to Bunnicula, who seemed to be asleep in his cage. A tiny smile sat upon his lips. A happy dream, I wondered? Or something else? My reverie was broken by the sound of crunching bacon. I was in the kitchen in a flash. Chapter 4. A Cat Prepares. I almost didn't make it to my meeting with Chester that night. Toby had a feast in his room. It was Friday night, and on Friday nights, Toby gets to stay up and read as late as he wants. So, of course, he needs a lot of food to keep up his strength. Good food like cheese crackers, chocolate cupcakes, my very favorite, the kind with cream in the middle, pretzels, and peanut butter sandwiches. The last I cannot abide because my mouth always gets stuck. Chocolate cupcakes with cream in the center, however, are another story. This particular evening, I stationed myself on Toby's stomach. Usually I'm a little more subtle, but having missed out on the bacon at breakfast, I was not about to take any chances on the chocolate cupcakes with cream in the center. Toby knew what I was after, but sometimes he thinks he's funny, and he plays little games with me. Hi, Harold. I bet you'd like a peanut butter sandwich, wouldn't you? Here, you have this one that's left over from yesterday, while I eat this boring old chocolate cupcake, which is nice and fresh and has cream in the middle. Okay, Harold? Ha ha, my sides are splitting. What's the matter? Don't you want the peanut butter sandwich? All right, I'll put it away for another night. Oh, here's something you might like. It's a green sour ball from Dad's candy dish that was stuck to my sock. Would you like that, huh, pal? Oh boy, the kid is really hot tonight. No, huh? Well, I'd give you one of my cupcakes, but I know how much you hate chocolate. Would a little drooling on your stomach help convince you otherwise? Oh, you like chocolate? Okay then, you can have both of them. One thing I have to say about Toby, although he's got a rotten sense of humor, he's a nice kid. Naturally, once I'd eaten both cupcakes, which took approximately 4 seconds, I felt obliged to hang around and let Toby know I was grateful. What better way than to share a few of his cheese crackers? Well, Harold, Toby said some time later, we've had quite a party, but I have to go to sleep now. I can't keep my eyes open, so I'll have to wait until tomorrow to find out what happens in the next chapter. This is a good book, Harold. It's called Treasure Island, and it's by a man named Robert Louis Stevenson. It's kind of hard reading, though. I have to keep looking up I have to keep looking the big words up in the dictionary, so it's taking me a long time to get through it. I've always had trouble with words myself. Half the time they don't mean what I think they're going to, and then, even when I do find out what they mean, I forget the next day anyway. You might say that I'm smart, but just not the scholarly type. But it's a really good story, Toby continued. It's all about pirates and this little boy just like me. No dogs? And a parrot, Harold. A parrot? What's a parrot? Is there anything about chocolate cake? That's my idea of treasure. Well, good night, Harold. If you're going to sleep here, you'll have to get off my stomach because it's a little full right now. Good night, Toby. I curled up at the foot of the bed, but I couldn't sleep trying to figure out what a parrot was. I thought it might be a lady pirate, since the words sounded something alike. Then again, I thought it might be an umbrella. Chester would know, I thought, so I went downstairs to ask him. Well, you certainly took your time, Chester snapped as I sauntered casually into the room. I finished my book half an hour ago. Where were you? It so happens I was discussing great works of literature with Toby. Since when is a Twinkies wrapper considered a great work of literature? I decided to ignore that. Unfortunately, several chocolate crumbs fell from my mouth to the floor at precisely that moment. As a matter of fact, I said, trying valiantly to regain my dignity, we were talking about Treasure Island. Ever hear of it? Ever hear of it? He sneered. I read that when I was a kitten. Oh, then tell me, Chester, what is a parrot? Chester looked at me scornfully. A parrot, he said, is a tropical zygodactyl bird. That's a very good word. Zygodactyl. Is it zygodactyl or zygodactyl? Zygodactyl. Order that has a stout curved hooked bill, is often crested, brilliantly variegated, and an excellent mimic. In other words, Harold, a parrot is a little bird with a big mouth. Oh, I said after a moment. I thought maybe it was an umbrella. Did you get so busy discussing parrots with Toby that you forgot you were going to meet me here? This is important, Harold. I still wasn't sure what a parrot was, but I decided this was not the time to pursue it. Come over here, Chester commanded, indicating his chair, and let me show you this book. I looked at the chair. Chester was already sitting in it, with a very large book open in front of him. I don't think there's going to be room for both of us, Chester, I said. Come on, you're wasting time. Just jump up here. I surveyed the scene carefully. I knew I would have to get a running start since there was just a tiny spot left for me. I would never be able to fit into it if I pulled myself up slowly. Apparently I was taking too long for Chester's liking. Will you get up here? He hissed. Okay, if that's what you want. I ran and jumped onto the chair, landing with a great kerplop. Chester, where are you? I cried. I couldn't see anything but the back of the chair. I'd forgotten to turn myself around. I'm here, you great oaf! I turned my head. What are you doing on the floor? I asked. You knocked me off the chair. Now just stay put. I'm coming back up. I moved to the back of the chair and Chester landed on the front. Now let's see, he said. We both have to see the book. You come over here and I'll move this way. I don't know if you've ever watched a cat try to decide where to sit, But it involves a lot of circling around, sitting, getting up again, circling some more, thinking about it, lying down, standing up, batting a paw or tail, and circling. A dog, on the other hand, sits. "This looks like a good spot," a dog will say to himself. He will then lower his body to the spot in question, and is usually so secure in his decision that he will fall asleep immediately. Chester took what felt like 20 minutes to settle himself in, and just as I was drifting off, the kick started. "Come on, Harold, quit hogging the seat, and wake up. What were you trying to do? Take a little cat nap? Haha." I yawned. "Now," said Chester, turning to the book, "let's get down to brass tacks." "What exactly is on your mind?" I asked. "This book and that rabbit," Chester replied. "Now tell me, Harold, have you noticed anything funny about that rabbit?" "No," I said, "but I've certainly noticed a lot of funny things about you recently." No, but I've certainly noticed a lot of funny things about you recently. "Think about it. That rabbit sleeps all day." "So do I. So do you." "Furthermore, he's got funny little sharp teeth." "So do I. So do you." "Furthermore, he gets in and out of his cage by himself. What kind of rabbit can do that?" "A smart one," I said. "I could do it." "We're not talking about you, Harold. We're talking about the rabbit. Now, where did they find him?" "At the movies." "Yes, but what movie?" "Dracula," I said. "So?" "So?" he said quickly. "Remember the note around his neck? What language was it in?" An obscure dialect of the Carpathian Mountain region," I answered smugly. He didn't know everything. "Aha!" Chester said. "But what area of the Carpathian Mountain region?" "Area? What's an area?" I looked at him blankly. "Transylvania!" he cried, triumphantly. "And that proves my point." "What point? What are we talking about?" "And don't forget the white tomato. That's most important of all." "But what?" "This book," said Chester, disregarding me, tells us what we need to know." "What?" I practically screamed. "What does it tell us? What does this book have to do with Bunnicula? What are you talking about? What's going on here? I can't stand it anymore." Chester regarded me coolly. "You're really very excitable, Harold. That's not good for your blood pressure." I put my paws around his throat. "Tell me," I said in a low, threatening voice, "or I'll squeeze you till you pop. This is a children's book," I thought. Threats of violence in a children's book. Against little kittens, no less. Okay, don't get upset. Now this book tells you everything you've always wanted to know about vampires, but were afraid to ask." Personally, I'd never wanted to know anything about vampires, but at the moment, I was afraid to tell that to Chester. "I still don't understand what vampires have to do with our little furry friend." "1," Chester said, "vampires do not sleep at night. They sleep only during the day. The same holds true for this rabbit. 2, vampires can get in and out of locked rooms. Bunnicula gets in and out of his locked cage." This was beginning to interest me. "Didn't you say something about the refrigerator?" "That's right, he got the refrigerator open. All by himself. 3, vampires have long pointed teeth. They're called fangs." "Well, don't we have fangs?" "No, we have canines. That's different." "What's different about it?" "Fangs are more pointed, and vampires use fangs to bite people on the neck." "Yuck, who'd want to do that?" "Vampires would, that's who." "Wait a minute, I saw Ms. Monroe bite Mr. Monroe on the neck once. Does that mean she's a vampire?" "Boy, are you dumb. She's not a vampire, she's a lawyer." "She bites necks." I'm starting to think he saw something a little different than neck biting, but we'll just gloss over that. "I don't think that's quite the same thing. Now, Bunnicula does not bite people on the neck, at least, not so far, but he does bite vegetables." "On the neck?" I asked. "Vegetables don't have necks, Harold. Vegetables are like that. It's like dogs. Dogs don't have brains. Dogs are like that. Oh yeah? I said. Of course he bites vegetables. All rabbits bite vegetables. He bites them, Harold, but he does not eat them. That tomato was all white. What does that mean? It means that he paints vegetables? I ventured. It means he bites... It means he bites vegetables to make a hole in them, and then he sucks out all the juices. What about all the lettuce and carrots that Toby has been feeding him in his cage? Aha! What indeed, Chester said. Look at this. Look at this! Whereupon he stuck his paw under the chair cushion and brought out with a flourish an assortment of strange white objects. Some of them looked like unironed handkerchiefs, and the others... well, the others didn't look like anything I'd ever seen before. What are they? I asked. Chester smiled. Lettuce and carrots, he said. White lettuce and carrots. I found them hidden behind his cage. I was aghast. What did it all mean? Could Chester be right? Was this harmless-looking little ball of fluff really a vampire? Just then, Chester let out a yelp. Look, he said, the cage is empty again. Oh, we're fools, we've let him out of our sight. It's your fault. My fault? You're the one who took 20 minutes to sit down. Well, if you hadn't knocked me off in the first place. Wait a minute, why are we arguing? Let's find Bunnicula. Just then we heard a click in the kitchen. Refrigerator, I whispered. Chester nodded. We jumped down and moved cautiously to the kitchen door. Shh! Chester warned unnecessarily as we crept along. Don't make any noise. We don't want him to hear us coming. Obviously, I retorted. The light went out under the door. You must have closed the refrigerator, Chester said. Easy now. We pushed the door open. The kitchen was dark. There was not a sound. Psst, Chester! What? I can't see. I can, but I can't see him. He's not here. There was a soft scamper across the linoleum. We turned just in time to see a little white tail bounce out the door into the living room. Drat, we've missed him. Come on, Harold. Let's see if we can catch up with him. Chester started around the door. Wait, Chester, what's that on the floor by the refrigerator? He turned. This new object interested him more than following Bunnicula. Watch out, he said. I'll take care of this. He slunk across the room slowly, muscles taut, eyes alert. When he was about 6 inches away, he stuck out his paw, closed his eyes, and batted at the object tentatively. I don't think he made any contact. Get closer, I said. Chester's eyes popped open. Who's the cat here? He asked. I know what I'm doing. And he proceeded to bat the air 3 more times. What is it? I squealed as my throat contracted in fear. I don't know yet, but whatever it is, it's not alive. Oh boy, if I wait for you, we'll be here all night. I walked bravely to the object and sniffed it. Well, said Chester. Beats me. Chester came closer. After a moment of close examination, he gasped. I jumped. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. Harold, Chester blurted out. What? What? It's... Yes? It's... What is it, Chester? It's a white zucchini! So we have a picture of Chester here with a little zucchini, and that's adorable. The Chester looks kind of wild-eyed here. I'm guessing he's not having the best time. Chester looking a bit like Ox in that drawing. We should get a picture. We should get a picture of Ox just to compare the two. Can you give Ox a white zucchini, just so we have it as a reference? Chapter 5. Chester goes into his act. How far are we in the book? How do I tell? Page 61 out of 162? I thought this was only 94 pages. Okay. In like book form. Oh, that makes sense. Some are illustrations. Yeah, that's true. Chapter 5. Chester goes into his act. Is this just a story? Yeah, this is we're reading Bunnicula, a rabbit tale of mystery. Ebook pages are a different size. That makes a lot of sense. So what are we? We're 100 pages from the end. We're about a fifth of the way, not a fifth, a third of the way through the book. And it's only been about an hour, so I guess we're making good pace. That's fine. We're doing all right. We might make it. We'll probably make it to the end tonight. Just wet the old whistle here. How we doing? How we feeling about the story so far, everybody? Do we really think Bunnicula's a vampire? The next morning I was awakened by a scream. Robert! Robert! Come down here right away! There's something wrong in the kitchen! For a moment, panic seized me. I thought she'd run out of dog food. Then I remembered the events of the previous evening. Mr. Monroe came bounding down the stairs. Chester! Chester! I cried. Did you see Mr. Monroe? His face has turned white. It's Bunnicula, isn't it? No, he said calmly. It's shaving cream, you idiot. Why, yes, Dane, we're looking for Bunny Dracula at the moment. Oh, we've got a little Dane clip with...
Go clip that. Somebody clip that, please.
Is that a kitty cat clip? Very, very, Oh, it's a kitten face clip. Aw. That brings back memories. That is an old one. Where were we? No, he said calmly. It's shaving cream, you idiot. By now, the excitement in the kitchen was at full throttle. The table was covered with Bunnicula's handiwork. There were white beans and white peas and white squash and white tomatoes, white lettuce and white zucchini. What can it mean, Robert? Ms. Monroe was saying. I'm getting worried. One tomato is a curiosity, but this is unheard of. There must be something wrong with our refrigerator. That's it. It's turning all our vegetables white. But look, she said. I left these tomatoes on the windowsill, and they're white too. And this squash I left in the bowl on the table. At that moment, Pete and Toby came into the kitchen. Holy cow, what's going on? Hey, maybe it's a vegetable blight, Mom. Could that be, Robert? Did you ever hear of anything like that? Well, no, actually. That is, I've heard of blight, but nothing like this. Chester leaned my way. This will take forever if we leave it up to them. Sometimes human beings can be so slow. I started to answer him, but he was heading for the table. What about that friend of yours in the agriculture department? Oh, Tom Cragen? Could we call him and ask him if we're doing something wrong? It's DDT, Mom, Peter interjected. I know about this stuff. It's because you buy vegetables that aren't organic. All vegetables are organic, Peter, Miss Monroe replied. That's not what my teacher says. See, Toby, I told you that this would happen. They're using chemicals on our food, and if you're not careful, you'll turn white too. Like Dad? Robert, couldn't you take that shaving cream off your face? Oh, yes, of course. Where's my towel? I know I brought it down with me. For that matter, where was Chester? I'd seen him going toward the table, but I'd lost track of him listening to all that talk about DDT. I just hope they didn't use any of that stuff where they grew chocolate cupcakes. Pete, did you take my towel? Why would I take your towel, Dad? I don't shave. Just then, the door swung open. I could not believe my eyes. There was Chester, with Mr. Monroe's towel draped across his back and tied under his neck like a cape. That was strange enough, but on his face was an expression that sent chills down my spine. His eyes were wide and staring. The corners of his mouth were pulled back in an evil grimace. His teeth were bared and gleaming in the morning light. He cackled menacingly and threw back his head as if he were laughing at all of us. I thought he'd completely lost his mind. There's my towel. There's my towel. What's the matter, Chester? Were you cold? Mr. Monroe bent down to take the towel from Chester. Before he could lay his hands on it, Chester flipped over onto his back, closed his eyes, and folded his paws over his chest. It was a hideous sight. He opened his eyes wide. With paws outstretched, he slowly lifted his head, his eyes glazed and vacant. Soon the upper half of his body followed, all in one smooth flow, until he was in a sitting position. Oh, look at that. It's Chester pretending to be a Dracula. That pic is you in the morning? This is absolutely what I look like after a nap. This is how I resuscitate myself. Hey Dad, did you leave your brandy glass out last night? Chester's acting a little weird. Well, son, cats are funny creatures. I glanced at Chester. He wasn't laughing. Psst, Chester, what are you up to? I'm a vampire, you dolt. Can't you tell? I'm trying to warn them. Well, it's not working. You'd better think of something else. Chester frowned, apparently deep in thought. So you see, Toby, Mr. Monroe was explaining, all cats are as individual as all people. Maybe he just wants to get our attention. Isn't that right, kitty cat? Ordinarily, Chester would have left the room upon being called kitty cat, but he was lost in thought. Come on, Chester, give me back my towel. Mr. Monroe moved toward Chester. Chester's eyes lit up. He looked at me and smiled. I sensed I was not going to like what he had in mind. I was toying with the notion of slinking under the table when Chester fixed me with his eyes. How deep they were, like black pools. I felt myself floating, lost in them, my will no longer my own. I felt an inexplicable urge to mutter, "Yes, master." He walked slowly, steadily toward me. As he drew nearer, I found myself unable to move. He stopped before me, never taking his gaze from me, and lunged. Yow! Mom, Chester bit Harold on the neck. Aw, that wasn't a real bite, was it, Chester? That was a love bite. Isn't that cute? Love bite my foot. That hurt. Chester, what's the matter with you? I sputtered. Do I look like a tomato? Oh, it doesn't matter anyway, Harold. They don't understand. How can human beings read the same books I do and still be so thick? Our conversation was interrupted. Miss Monroe picked up Chester and cuddled him. I was praying she would not add insult to injury by kissing his nose, which he hates more than anything. Poor Chester, do you need a little love? You know that I'm going to do, you big old ball of fuzz, you. Oh, I could tell what was coming. I'm going to kiss you on your little nose. Yep, I could tell that was coming, all right. Chester knew better than to resist. He went limp in Miss Monroe's arms. Miss Monroe took his towel off of Chester. I still don't know why he's wearing my towel, he said. Dane, thank you for the bits. I think he must be cold, dear. Here's your towel. Why don't you get his kitty sweater? Chester looked ill, and he can wear that all day. As Chester was being buttoned into his bright yellow sweater, with little purple mice and cowboy hats all over it, Mr. Monroe said, What about those vegetables? Shall I speak to Tom Cragen? Yes, dear, Miss Monroe said. Why don't you? I'm sure there's some explanation. In the meantime, I'll change markets. Tell you the truth, I'm really much more worried about Chester. You'd better keep an eye on him. Chester and I did not speak until late afternoon. I was busy nursing my neck, and Chester was busy hiding under the sofa, too embarrassed to be seen. When we did speak at last, it was a brief exchange. Hey, Chester, I called when he finally crawled out from under. We don't have to worry about any vampire bunnies anymore. All you have to do is stand outside his cage in that sweater, and he'll laugh himself to death. Chester was not amused. That's right, make fun, all of you. No one understands. I tried to warn them, and they wouldn't heed. Now I'm gonna take matters into my own hands. Whereupon Chester and his 16 purple mice went into the kitchen for dinner. Chapter 6. Harold helps out. If not for smooching, why nose so cute? That's the real question, Spice. That's the real question. We gotta ask ourselves that. Chapter 6. Harold helps out. That night, I had an uneasy sleep. Strange noises emanated from downstairs. It sounded like toenails were clicking back and forth on the floor. It must be Bunnicula making his midnight run, I thought, although I'd never known him to make a sound. And I smelled the funniest odor in the air. Something familiar, though I couldn't place it. Oh, what was that? I saw a flash on one of my screens. As the night progressed, it grew stronger and stronger until finally it tickled my nose, and I sneezed myself awake. I jumped off Toby's bed, still sniffling, and headed down the stairs for the living room to find Chester, to see if he could smell it too. The odor grew even stronger as I approached the living room. Standing in the doorway was Chester, a strange pendant hanging from his neck. "Phew, Chester," I said. "What are you wearing that awful thing for? It smells." "Of course it smells," he replied. "Here, I made one for you too. Put it on." "Are you kidding? That thing smells like garlic." "It is garlic," Chester stated matter-of-factly. "Why are you wearing garlic?" I asked, thinking that by this time Chester was capable of anything. As we walked into the living room, I tripped on another piece of garlic laying in the doorway. "Careful," said Chester. "Watch your step." I surveyed the room and saw that it was strewn with garlic. On the doorways, over the windows, and around Bunnicula's cage. The poor little fellow had buried his nose as far as possible under his blanket. I was about to follow his example and return to Toby's bed to bury my nose under the blankets when Chester grabbed my tail with his teeth. "You're not leaving this room until you put this on," he grumbled at me. I think that's what he said. I wasn't sure because he had my tail in his mouth. "It's not polite to talk with your mouth full, Chester. Drop that tail." Meanwhile, my eyes were beginning to water. Yeah, Jayla, we're just doing the story tonight. We're just doing the book. We raised, I set a charity goal for $100 that if we raised it, we would read, this children's book, and the community, raised it pretty much immediately, so they were really hyped for it. So I'm rewarding them with the book. Where were we? "It's not polite to talk with your mouth full, Chester. Drop that tail." Meanwhile, my eyes were beginning to water. "Listen," Chester snapped at me, fortunately letting go of my tail first. "The book said to use garlic." "What book?" I asked. "The Joy of Cooking?" Chester continued. "The mark of the vampire says garlic renders vampires immobile." "What does that mean?" "It means they can't go anywhere if there's garlic around." "Well, I've got news for you, Chester. I can't go anywhere either. The smell is killing me." "But you've got to put it on. It says so in the book. If you don't put it on, I'll put it on for you." "Oh, Chester," I said as my nose suddenly and involuntarily closed. "I'd be leaving this room right now." Sorry. "Oh, Chester," I said as my nose suddenly and involuntarily closed. "I'd be leaving this room right now." And I did. I was so sick to my stomach from the aroma that I decided to spend the early morning hours outdoors. As dawn approached, it seemed that it would be a peaceful day. The sky was clear, the birds were singing, and I felt contented after my difficult night just to be lying in the grass. Feeling the ladybugs crawl up my ears, suddenly the calm was broken. Strange, piercing screams came from the area of the kitchen. Not again, I thought. What's turned white now? As it happened, it was Chester. There in the sink, lathered with soap, was the feline detective, yelling his head off. Miss Monroe was scrubbing him fiercely, and from the sound of her voice, was in the middle of a long lecture. I don't know what's gotten into you, Chester. You never played with garlic before. I thought you hated the smell of it. And here you've gotten it all over yourself. Stop wriggling. You'll get soap in your eyes. If you want to chew on something, I'll get you some catnip, but stay out of my herbs. Then she rinsed him off, rubbed him with a towel, and plunked him right in front of the door of the stove to finish drying. Shut the door, he hissed at me. I'm freezing. That silly woman. Doesn't she know cats don't get baths? What do you mean? I get baths all the time, I said, closing the door with my back foot. That's because you're too dumb to bathe yourself. Cats always bathe themselves. It's a rule. Everyone knows that. Well, at least it smells nice in here again, I sniffed as I settled down to Chester by the stove. And it's all toasty warm here in the kitchen. Sure, it smells nice again, he said, but now the house isn't safe anymore. What do you mean? I asked, getting closer. I mean it worked last night. The garlic worked. No more vegetables turned white, did they? No, but... That means Bunnicula didn't get out of his cage last night. Maybe he was just tired. Or maybe he was full. Don't be ridiculous, he replied. It was the garlic. He couldn't leave his cage. But tonight he'll be free to roam again. I've got to find a way to stop him that isn't smelly. Mr. and Miss Monroe were hurrying in and out of the room, stepping over us, late for work. Miss Monroe yelled up to Toby, Don't forget to take the steak out of the freezer when you get home today, Toby, and leave it on the table to defrost. And this time, remember to put a plate under it. Chester's ears perked up. Of course, he said. That's what I'll do. And he strolled past me with a knowing smile. Miss Monroe turned off the stove and left the room. It was too much for me to figure out, so I went to sleep on the nice warm kitchen floor. I was awakened by a bite on the ear. Chester was sitting by me, looking very impatient. Boy, nothing wakes you up, he said. I've been yelling and poking at you for 10 minutes. I was dreaming, I answered defensively, about a place where there weren't any cats around to bother nice dogs and wake them up when they needed their rest. You can finish sleeping later, he said crisply. Right now, you have to help me. Do what? I asked. Get Bunnicula out of his cage. I sprang back. Get him out of the cage? I thought that was what you didn't want. I thought you said he was dangerous. What if he attacks me? Aren't you ashamed? Chester replied. Afraid of a harmless little bunny? Harmless? I thought you said he was a threat to this house and everyone in it. Isn't that what you said? Isn't that what we've been talking about all this time? He is a threat, but only at night. During the day, he's just a very sleepy rabbit, and that's why we have to do it now, while the sun is still up. Follow me, he said. There isn't much time. Toby stayed down here forever, and the others will be home soon. Boy, you must have been tired, Harold. You slept through lunch. I followed Chester into the living room. My heart was pounding as he unlocked the cage door with his paw. It looked as if he'd had years of experience opening locks. The door swung open. Bunnicula was sleeping peacefully. He did, however, look a little green around the gills. Probably from the garlic. I was just wondering how a rabbit could have gills when Chester said, Okay, Harold, do your stuff while I get what I need from the kitchen. Well, what do you want me to do? I can't read minds. Get him out of the cage and onto the floor, and I'll be right back, Chester said. What? 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 I verbalized. How am I supposed to do that? Use your head, he answered, and he was gone. Looking at the cage, I realized that was precisely what I would have to do. Until this moment, I had never had to face the possibility of actual physical contact with a real, live rabbit. I looked upon my chore reluctantly. I seemed to recall my grandfather telling me that one picked a rabbit up by its neck with one's teeth. This I attempted, though the very idea set my stomach churning. I squeezed my head through the tiny door and gently placed my teeth around the skin of the bunny's neck. To avoid any suggestion of violence, I've never been one for the sport of hunting, I preferred to think of myself as the creature's mother, carrying it off to safety. Unfortunately, I couldn't carry it anywhere. Once my head was in the cage, it wouldn't come out again. I could go neither forward nor backward. At that moment, Chester appeared at the door, carrying in his mouth what looked every bit like a nice, big, juicy, raw steak. My eyes popped, my teeth dropped Bunnicula, my mouth opened, and I began to drool. After all, I had missed lunch. Chester, what are you doing with that steak? Haven't you gotten him out of there yet? I can't get either of us out of here. My head's stuck. Oh, Harold, sometimes I despair. Here, I'll get you both out. I should have done everything myself. He came over, dropped the steak just a few feet away from me, and climbed up on my shoulders. You pull your head out while I push against the cage. Who gets the steak? I asked. Don't worry about the steak, Harold. Just pull. I would have more motivation if I knew who it is that got the steak. Chester ignored me. I pulled, he pushed. I felt something go pop. We all fell in a jumble. Chester, the cage, Bunnicula, and me. When I looked around, Bunnicula was lying next to me, still sound asleep. There you are, I said. We got him out. Now, let's eat. No dice, Chester said. Just read this to me so I'll be sure I'm doing it right. And he handed me a book. That book again. Start at the top of the page, Chester said as he picked up the steak. Why don't you read and I'll hold the steak? Chester replied. I took it to mean that I was to start reading. To destroy the vampire and end his reign of terror, it is necessary to pound a sharp steak. Chester interrupted. A sharp steak? He asked. What does that mean? I'll taste it and tell you if it's sharp, I offered. Oh, never mind. This will do. It's sirloin. Keep reading. To pound a sharp steak into the vampire's heart. This must be done during the daylight hours when the vampire has no powers. Okay, he said. This is it. I'm sorry I had to go this far, but if they'd listened, this wouldn't have been necessary. He dragged the steak across the floor and laid it across the inert bunny. Then with his paws, he began to hit the steak. Are you sure this is what they mean, Chester? Am I anywhere near his heart? He asked. It's hard to tell, I said. All I can really see are his nose and his ears. You know, he's really sort of cute. Chester was getting that glint in his eyes again. He was pounding away at the steak, harder and harder. Be careful, I cried. You'll hurt him. Chester increased his attack. I was really getting worried when the door opened and Mr. and Miss Monroe were suddenly with us in the room. Chester, Miss Monroe screamed. What are you doing with my dinner? Robert, get that steak away from Chester. And what's the matter with Bunnicula? Why is he on the floor? Mr. Monroe took the beautiful steak away. I wished it a fond farewell with tears in my eyes. As the kitchen door swung open, As the kitchen door swung open, Chester whispered with cold determination. All right, the last resort, and dashed into the kitchen. Seconds later, he was back, carrying his water dish between his teeth. He ran toward Bunnicula and with a mad yowl threw the dish of water at the rabbit. Unfortunately, he was so hysterical that his aim was not the best. With water dripping from my ears, I watched Miss Monroe pick Chester up by the scruff of his neck, and toss him unceremoniously out the door. Robert, we are going to have to do something about that cat. Look at this mess. Dinner's ruined, the poor bunny is out of his cage, and Harold is sopping wet. I tried to look as pathetic as I knew how. Aw, poor Harold, Miss Monroe cooed as she dried me off. You've had a rough day, you and Bunnicula. I don't know what's the matter with your friend, but unless he learns how to behave, he'll just have to spend the night outside. Mr. Monroe, meanwhile, had restored Bunnicula to his cage, and the cage to the windowsill. I couldn't believe it when I saw that Bunnicula was still asleep. Anne, Mr. Monroe said, the steak is ruined. Why don't we let Harold have it? He deserves a treat anyway. Don't you, old boy? I panted appropriately. After my delicious dinner, I turned my attention to the book still lying open on the floor. Another method of destroying the vampire is to immerse the body in water. The body will then shrivel and disappear as the vampire emits one last scream of terror. Woo, I thought. That's what he was trying to do. Thank goodness he missed. I had no regrets about missing a scene like that. Poor Bunnicula. I looked over toward the cage, and there on the other side of the window was a pathetic tabby face looking in. His little nose was pressed against the window. I couldn't hear him, but from the movement of his lips, I could see he was very unhappy. Poor Chester. As for me, Miss Monroe spent the evening petting me, and the family chatted with me all night long. And of course, I'd had my yummy steak dinner. So it wasn't such a bad day after all. Except that now my steak was all gone. Poor Harold. You would 100% buy an Ashwood Audio Bunnicula audiobook? Oh, I appreciate that, Dane. How we doing on the... Let's see. We're about exactly at the halfway point. Ooh, this is exhausting. I forgot how exhausting reading is. Especially reading to an audience. How are we doing? How are we liking everything so far, folks? Chapter 7, A New Friend in Need. In the days that followed, Chester's behavior was exemplary. He purred and he cooed and he cleaned his paws. And he rubbed up against everyone's legs to show what a good boy he was. I was getting worried. Chester acts that way only when he has something devious in the back of his mind. But I didn't know what it was. He had tried everything in the book to get rid of vampires, and all of his efforts had failed. But I knew from the expression on his face that something was definitely up. Of course, I didn't know for certain, because he had not spoken to me since the steak incident. I guess he realized that my heart wasn't in the destruction of the bunny vampire. In fact, I was beginning to like the little fellow. The Monroes were relieved by Chester's improved behavior. They didn't know how to account for his strange doings, but, to their credit, they were willing to let bygones be bygones. The only disturbing factor in all our lives was the reappearance of the white vegetables each morning in the kitchen. Yet, after a few days, even that stopped. Life seemed to return to normal. One evening, I dropped by Bunnicula's cage to chat. I'd found myself doing that more and more since Chester had stopped talking to me. Of course, Bunnicula didn't talk back. I just realized that Bunnicula doesn't talk this whole time. I want to do my Dracula voice. It's one of my favorites. But if the bunny never talks, then I never get to do the voice. Of course, Bunnicula didn't talk back, but he was a good listener. I'd begun to think of him as a friend. A strange one, granted, but one can't always choose one's friends. I was distressed this particular evening to see that he was dragging his ears, as it were. He looked tired and listless. I felt his nose, and it seemed a little warmer than it should have been. I became alarmed. I ran over to Toby, who was doing a picture puzzle on the floor, and began to bark. Something I do only in cases of extreme emergencies, since even I do not care for the sound. "What's the matter, Harold?" Toby asked, without moving. "Are there burglars?" I ran to the cage and looked at Bunnicula. I looked back at Toby and whimpered. Toby just looked confused. "Do you want to play with Bunnicula? Shall I take him out of the cage?" "Woof," I responded, indicating I hoped that was indeed what he should do. "I'll ask Mom and Dad, Harold. You wait here." He was back in a minute, shaking his head. "I'm sorry, Harold, but Mom says you can't play with the rabbit. It causes too much commotion." I looked down at the floor and whimpered again. "Sorry, Harold. Maybe later when we're all in here together." I regarded Bunnicula, whose eyes met mine. He gave a little shudder, and I felt like crying. My friend was sick, and I didn't know what to do. I wished I could tell Chester, but I knew it was no use. He was just too mad at me. I would have to sort this one out on my own. That night, I couldn't sleep worrying about Bunnicula. I decided to go downstairs and check on his condition. What I saw when I entered the living room horrified me. Bunnicula was out of his cage on the floor, while Chester stood in front of him, a piece of garlic around his neck and his arms outstretched, blocking the kitchen door. Suddenly, it all fell into place. Chester was starving Bunnicula. Of course, that's why he seemed so listless, and that's why the vegetables had stopped turning white. Chester had made it impossible for Bunnicula to eat. "Chester!" I cried. Chester jumped very high. Chester jumped a very high jump. "What are you doing down here?" He spat at me. "What are you doing down here?" He spat at me as he landed. "I know what you're doing, Chester, and the jig is up. That little bunny never hurt anybody. All he's doing is eating his own way. What do you care if he drains a few vegetables?" "He's a vampire," Chester snarled. "Today vegetables, tomorrow the world." "I think perhaps you're overstating your case," I suggested cautiously. "Go back to bed, Harold. This is larger than the two of us. It may seem harsh, but I'm only being cruel to be kind." Who's he being kind to? I wondered as I went back upstairs. The tomatoes and zucchinis of the world? Maybe a few cabbages? It just didn't make sense. But I could see I wasn't going to get anywhere at Chester tonight. Tomorrow, however, would be another story. I was determined that, by hook or by crook, my friend Bunnicula would eat by sundown the next day. Chapter 8. Disaster in the dining room. I realized that there was nothing I could do for Bunnicula during the day, since he was sleeping. That gave me time to plan my strategy. At first, I thought I would bring food to his cage. Then it occurred to me that Chester must be taking everything away that was given to him. Pete and Toby usually left lettuce for Bunnicula during the day while he was sleeping. Chester, ever watchful, probably nabbed it each evening just before the rabbit woke. No, there would have to be another way. I thought and thought all afternoon, and all I could see was that Chester had done a good job of isolating Bunnicula from his food. There was no way I could think of to overcome Chester's game plan. As evening drew closer, and I grew more and more frantic, I stumbled into the dining room and saw the answer to my problem sitting before me on the table. It was a big bowl of salad. All I had to do was get Bunnicula to the salad and let him get his fill before the family came in to eat. With that funny white dressing on it, they would never notice if a few vegetables were white. I ran to the hallway to check the clock. 6:15. It would be 15 minutes before the sun went down and Bunnicula woke up. I would then need at least 5 minutes to get him from his cage to the table and feed him. All I had to do was make sure no one came into the room until he had finished. I needed a good 20 minutes at least. Yeesh, 20 minutes when the salad's already dressed? It's gonna wilt. I went back into the living room. Chester was asleep on his brown velvet chair, shedding in his sleep, still worn out from the previous night's activities. I checked upstairs. Toby was reading in his room, the last chapter of Treasure Island, I noted. Pete, who should have been doing his homework, was listening to records in his room. I ran down to the kitchen. "Hello, Harold," Miss Monroe said as I came through the door. "What's new?" "Other than a rabbit starving in the next room and an imminent attack on your salad bowl, nothing," I thought. I stood at her feet and panted. She scratched my head. This gave me a moment to check out how far she was in her cooking. "Sorry, Harold," she said. "I have to baste this chicken." I noticed the oven timer still had 35 minutes to go. It'll be tight, I thought, but I can make it. Now where is Mr. Monroe? I went to the front door and whimpered loudly. Miss Monroe followed me. "Are you waiting for Daddy, Harold? He'll be home soon." "Soon isn't good enough. How soon?" I whimpered again. "Patience, boy. He's late at a school meeting. He should be here any time." She went back into the kitchen and I checked the clock. 6:25. It was getting dark and Chester was still asleep. Time to swing into action. Having watched Chester undo the lock on Bunnicula's cage, and having participated in that unfortunate steak episode some days earlier, I knew I would have no problem getting Bunnicula out. I just had to be a little more careful where I positioned my head so that I wouldn't find myself in the humiliating predicament of getting stuck a second time. My timing was perfect. Bunnicula swinging peacefully from my teeth, I made my way stealthily toward the dining room as the last rays of sunlight gave way to the dark of night. Once inside the dining room door, Bunnicula awakened in great bewilderment. It is not every day, after all, that one finds oneself, upon awakening, hanging from the jaws of a fellow creature. Even so caring and gentle a creature as myself. Bunnicula opened his eyes wide and turned his face, as best he could, to me. I jumped up onto the nearest chair and placed the rabbit safely on the table's edge. "Okay," I whispered. "There's your dinner. Go to it. Get your fill as fast as you can, poor bunny. I'll stand guard." I don't know that Bunnicula fully understood what was going on, but the sight of the vegetables piled high in the center of the table sent him scurrying in their direction. He was very hungry. As luck would have it, and as I should have anticipated, Chester's sense of timing was as astute as my own. No sooner had Bunnicula reached the edge of the salad bowl than the door swung open, and Chester bounded into the room. He surveyed the scene frantically. I was unable to act fast enough. Upon seeing Bunnicula about to enjoy his first bit of nourishment in days, Chester leaped across the table, seemingly without touching the floors, chairs, or anything else, between himself and our furry friend, and landed directly on top of the bunny. "Oh, no, you don't!" he shrieked. Bunnicula, not sure what to do, jumped high in the air and landed with a great scattering of greens, smack in the center of the salad bowl. Lettuce and tomatoes and carrots and cucumbers went flying all over the table and onto the floor. Chester flattened his ears, wiggled his rear end, and smiled in anticipation. To cat observers, this is known as the attack position. "Run, Bunnicula!" I shouted. Bunnicula turned in my direction as if to say, "Where?" "Anywhere!" I cried. "Just get out of the way!" Chester sprang. Bunnicula jumped. In the flash of a second, they had changed positions. Chester now found himself flat on his back, owing to the slipperiness of the salad dressing in the bowl, and Bunnicula, too dazed to even think about food now, hovered quivering on the table. Was he actually hovering? Was the bunny actually doing a big hover? Chester was having a great deal of difficulty getting back on his feet, and I knew it was only a matter of seconds before he'd attack again. I knew also that Bunnicula was too petrified to do anything to save himself, so I did the only thing I could. I barked, very loudly and very rapidly. The whole family rushed through the doors. Mr. Monroe must have come home because his coat was still on. "Oh no!" cried Mrs. Monroe. "That's it, Chester! This is Chester's last stand!" Chester rolled his eyes heavenward and didn't even try to move. "Mom," said Toby, tugging at his mother's arm. "Look at Bunnicula! How did he get out of his cage? He looks scared!" "Of course he's scared," Miss Monroe said. "We probably forgot to latch his cage and he got out. I think Chester has been chasing him." Toby put his face close to the rabbit. "Mom, doesn't Bunnicula look kind of sick?" "We'd better take them all to the vet to see if any damage was done," she answered. I started to whimper. No need for me to go to the vet. Mr. Monroe patted my head. "We may as well take Harold along," he said. "He's probably due for his shots." Miss Monroe carefully picked Chester out of the salad bowl and carried him by the scruff of the neck to the kitchen. "I'm going to give Chester a quick bath," she said to Mr. Monroe. "Why don't you put together a fresh salad? Toby, you and Peter put Bunnicula back in his cage and then clean up the table." I didn't stick around for an assignment. This was not the time to be in the way. Besides, I now had a whole evening and night ruined worrying about the next morning's visit to the vet. This little effort of mine, I thought, had been a disaster in more ways than one. Chapter 9. All's well that ends well. Almost. Looking back on that night, I remember thinking that this whole mess could have been resolved happily. What would become of Bunnicula, my new friend, who was suffering from starvation? Or what of Chester, my old friend, who seemed to have flipped his lid and, if you'll pardon the expression, was in the doghouse with the Monroes? A far greater concern at the time, of course, was my own future, for on that night, all that consumed my thoughts was the fear of the next day's injections. It all seemed hopeless indeed. It all seemed hopeless indeed. But looking back on the next day, I can tell you that happy endings are possible, even in situations as fraught with complications as this one. Early the next morning, we all piled into the car, some of us with greater reluctance than others, and trundled off to the vet. By afternoon, we were on our way to solving our problems. The vet worked everything out very nicely. He discovered that Bunnicula was suffering from extreme hunger. I could have told him that. Rather than jar his fragile stomach with solid foods, the doctor decided he should be put on a liquid diet until he got better. So Bunnicula was immediately given some carrot juice, which he drank eagerly. After he finished, he looked over at me with a great grin on his face and winked. Chester was diagnosed as being emotionally overwrought. It was suggested that he start sessions with a cat psychiatrist to work out what the doctor called a case of sibling rivalry with Bunnicula. Wolf, thank you for the resub and welcome in. Pull up a chair by the fire, grab some hot chalky. Get ready for some Bunnicula. I asked Chester later what a sibling was, but he wasn't speaking to me. So I looked it up. It's like a brother or sister, and sibling rivalry means you are competing with your brother or sister for attention. I wasn't sure this was Chester's problem, but it sure explained a lot about Toby and Peter. As for me, well, I came out the best. Dr. Wasserman was all set to give me my shots when the nurse came in with my card. Wait, doctor, this dog doesn't need his shots yet. It's too soon. So I got a pat on the head and a doggy pop instead. These days, everything is back to normal in the Monroe household. Almost. Bunnicula liked his liquid diet so much that the Monroes have kept him on it. And oddly enough, there have been no problems with vegetables mysteriously turning white since. Chester, of course, insists that this proves his theory. Obviously, Harold, the liquefied vegetables take the place of the vegetable juices, so Bunnicula has no real need to go roaming anymore. Then he's not a vampire, I said. Nonsense. He's a vampire, all right, but he's a modern vampire. He gets his juices from a blender. Case closed, Sherlock? I queried. Case closed. Oh, Chester. Yes, Harold? What are those two funny marks on your neck? Chester jumped and I laughed. Very funny, he said as he began to bat his tail. Very funny. Monroes never knew anything of Chester's theory. They changed markets and to this day believe they were the victims of a curious vegetable light. Bunnicula and I have become good friends. He still doesn't say anything, but he snuggles up next to me by the fireplace, and we take long, cozy snoozes together. One night, I sang him a lullaby in the obscure dialect of his homeland, and he slept very peacefully. It was that night that cemented our friendship. Now, about Chester, I said that evening was back to normal. Almost. I said that everything was back to normal. Almost. Naturally, Chester is the almost. He has been seeing his psychiatrist, Dr. Vera Katz, twice a week for some time now. He takes his therapy very seriously. The other morning I was trying to get a little sleep when Chester came over and nudged me in the ribs. Harold, do you realize we've never really communicated? I mean, really communicated? I opened one eye cautiously. And in order to communicate, Harold, you have to really be in touch with yourself. Are you in touch with yourself, Harold? Can you look yourself in the mirror and say, I know who I am, I'm in touch with the meanness that is me, and I can reach out to the you-ness that is you? I closed my eye. I'm used to it by now. He talks like that all the time. He no longer reads Edgar Allan Poe at night. And once he concluded that he had been right about Bunnicula, there's been no more talk about vampires. The mark of the vampire sits, its usefulness obsolete, on its shelf. Right now he's reading Finding Yourself by Screaming a Lot. And the other night... when... I'm sorry, I need that book. He's been reading Finding Yourself by Screaming a Lot. And the other night, when I heard the most awful noise coming from the basement, I didn't even bat an eyelid. I knew it was Chester finding himself, as he calls it. He explained to me that he's getting in touch with his kittenhood. And I've told him that's fine, just to let me know when he's going to do it so I can be elsewhere. I've had enough trouble from Chester's adventures. So that's my story, and the story of a mysterious stranger who no longer seems quite so mysterious, and who's definitely no longer a stranger. I presented the facts as clearly as I could, and I leave it to you, dear reader, to draw your own conclusions. I must now bring this narrative to a close. Since it is a Friday night, Toby's night to stay up late and read, I can hear the crinkling of cellophane. I can only hope it covers 2 chocolate cupcakes with cream filling. Bunnicula through the ages? Oh, wait, that's the end of the story. There's still 60 pages left. What's the rest of the book? Anniversary edition? Okay. A message from Max Brailer. Is there more? Oh, there's an illustrated version. It's a bunch of. Look at the Bunnicula. Look at how cute. You can see it's maybe you can't see, but maybe you can see on this side that there's like a little cape that is his pattern resembles. Okay, I guess we've finished the book, everybody. I didn't expect us to finish it that quickly. Now what? I'd have to. I expected that to take somewhere around 3 hours. It only took an hour and a half. Book 2. I'd have to find book 2. How do I? Let's see. Bu 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 bu. There's a magazine rack. Let's see. What is the second book titled? Holiday Inn? Let's see if we can find it online. Let's see. There's a book about Terry Pratchett. Buy it on Kindle. I'm trying to figure out if there's a way for me to search this. Ba 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 ba. So what did we think of the story? Did we like Bunnicula, everybody? Is there another children's book you would like me to read to you? Need some Libby customer support? I do kind of... I can't figure out where the search bar is, Spice. Brings back memories. Joined late, but it sounded cute. It was a very cute story. Here are the titles our librarians have I don't see over 1,000 titles.
Hello, Libby customer service.
Ah!
How may I help?
Hi, Spice.
Howdy. Let me pull up my desktop version.
I don't
it should
think
be kind of
this
like
will
the
have
bottom
any...
of the screen that should see the search bar.
Oh, I see it.
Yeah.
I didn't look low enough. I was looking up top. Okay,
Libby has
holiday.
a strange layout.
It looks like we don't have access to it immediately. Why don't we have access to it immediately? Did somebody already check it out? You never read Bunnicula before and that was fun? Thank you so much, Miss Magpie. I really appreciate you saying so. I'm glad you had a good time. I'm glad you enjoyed the story. Sorry, what was that, Spice?
I was just gonna ask if you wouldn't mind flitting back to your Libby screen real quick, so I can take a look.
Okay. Also, Spice is here, everybody. These Spice and Rose.
Hello. So your library doesn't own it?
No!
Is what that means. The notify me means that there just aren't any copies available. I checked my library too. We have the same problem.
Aw.
Let me check something quick.
There's Return to Holiday Inn. This is number 5 in the series. Apparently they get 2 more cats, 3 more dogs, and a ferret.
It's a menagerie. Not quite a menagerie coast, but definitely a menagerie.
It looks like we... Oh no, we don't have access to the 1 to 3 series collection. That's an audiobook also, anyway.
Mm-hmm.
What is deep search? Include titles that your library doesn't have. This is applied automatically when found. Okay. Well, I mean, I guess that's it. We can't do much more if we don't have access to the books.
Yeah, not at this moment. You can put in a request with your lending library and be like, hey, I need you to buy this. Like, please buy the license to this. You may need a physical copy of the book. I can keep digging. There's a couple other ebook resources, but I don't know if your library has them or not.
No worries, I'm sure it's fine.
It's not fine. You have to read the others. You don't understand. But we'll figure it out.
Oh! What is Sonia Suset? Bunnicula grades 4 through 7. Is this a Cliff Notes version of a children's storybook?
I hope so.
There's a graphic novel.
Mm-hmm.
Bunnicula meets Edgar Allan Crow? I'm sad I didn't get to use the vampire voice much. I was actually running around my house today doing the I want to suck your blood.
You were doing warm-ups for it?
Of course I was doing warm-ups. I'm a professional.
That's It's amazing.
If your favorite bookstore was open, you'd ask there. The lady that runs it has found so many hard-to-find books, but she's on vacation. Aw. Well, I hope she's enjoying her vacation.
Yeah. It's only
But
an
how
issue
inconvenient.
with the ebook. It's just an ebook problem.
Did they never scan the book?
They did, just no one. It's one of those things where it's probably just slightly out of like the zeitgeist right now, so kids aren't wanting to read all of them.
Yeah.
Sort of like how Goosebumps kind of flips in and out.
You read the sample.
So read the sample. Just sample all of them.
It looks like most of the sample is just the introductory pages.
The accolades.
It's the editor's notes and stuff. So what did that actually... Yeah, so there's 4 pages of the actual book in here, in the sample.
Ah.
Well, that's a bummer. Oh well. Well, what other children's books? I don't know. It's only...
Goosebumps, scary stories to tell in the dark.
Goosebumps! Yes!
You want to read Goosebumps?
Maybe.
You should read Goosebump.
Night of the Living Dummy. Already, how long is a Goosebump?
They're quick. I would say they're probably like on par with Bunnicula.
Do we want to try reading the Night of the Living Dummy?
Or do you want to find one that has a vampire in it?
I want to find one that has a vampire in it. There's one about sharks called Deep Trouble.
No. Let's see. Looks like Vampire Breath from the base series.
There's one called
know.
Slime Doesn't Pay. What did you say the other one was called?
Vampire Breath.
Vampire Breath. Okay. I'm guessing my library doesn't carry it.
Ugh. Rude.
It's number 49 in the series.
I mean, any Goosebump's a good Goosebump.
Night of the Living Dummy is a classic.
That's true. I hate Slappy with a deep passion because of this book.
Open book. How long is it actually? Because if it's like really long... Oh, it's even longer. It's about as long as...
You could skip to the end though and see if it's all like filler pages.
There's apparently a Behind the Screams at page 163. So 164 is the...
So a little bit longer, yeah. You don't have to finish it all right now.
One Day at Horrorland was a good one too. I think I've read it One Day at Horrorland recently. Let's not read Night of the Living Dummy. 'Tis a silly book. Because if we're gonna read something, we may as well read it to the end. Although it's something that we'd have to read in an hour, so it'd have to be like a 60-page book.
Searching.
Can we search books by the number of pages that are in it?
I don't know, actually. That's a good question.
Ooh, the Scarecrow walks at midnight.
I mean, hear me out. You don't have work tomorrow.
It's true that I don't have work tomorrow.
But
It
do
is
you
also
have enough
true
hot
that
chocolate?
that was gonna be my exact dereliction.
Uh-huh.
Does dereliction work there? Who knows?
Works enough. I'm not gonna correct you. If for some reason it was wrong. How long is just Dracula for kids?
Dracula for kids?
Well, okay. Because they do all those, like, kids abridged versions. And those
Bunnicula
usually
is what
pretty
comes up.
short.
Let's see. Kids. Astronomy for kids. Crafting for kids. This was not the right search.
Which pages are you?
Sherlock Holmes and Dracula is actually a book that I've read before.
How was that one?
It's okay.
Hmm.
It took me a while to get through. It wasn't the best Sherlock Holmes book I've read.
Was it the best Dracula book you've read?
No. I will say I had a much harder time with the original Dracula. It was a very hard read for me.
Mm-hmm.
It was super flowery and not attention grabbing at all. I much preferred the Nosferatu movie.
The new one? The old one? Yes?
The new one. I haven't seen the old one.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Also, this one had the memes about it, so that was good.
That does help. I might have something for you.
Yes.
There is a children's series called A to Z Mysteries, and a book called The Vampire's Vacation.
A to Z Mysteries, Vampire's Vacation.
And it's 114 pages in Libby.
Help Dink, Josh, and Ruth Rose solve mysteries from A to Z in this chapter book that's perfect for Halloween. Yeah, sure. Let's read The Vampire's Vacation.
Sweet.
First, let's see how long it is in Libby. You said how long? 108 pages?
119 in Libby. Because I just checked it out on my card. So I could look.
Mine only goes to 108.
Well, even better.
V is for victim. Inside the dark closet, Dink hid behind the cape, tugging Josh with him. With their backs to the wall, they listened. Next to him, Dink felt Josh shaking. Dink could hardly hear anything other than his own racing heartbeat. Then he heard a door open and close. Feet whispered across the carpet. Something creaked a chair or a bed. Then only silence. Suddenly, the closet door was yanked open. Oh, was that just a
Preview.
just a preview? I apologize,
Yeah.
everybody, for getting excited.
Hey, it's building the suspense. getting the audience ready.
Careful going over the curb or you'll spill the whole pile, Dink cautioned his friend Josh. You and Ruth Rose are supposed to be holding on to it, Josh answered. We are holding, Josh, Ruth Rose said. But you're pulling the wagon too fast. An hour before, Dink and Josh had helped Ruth Rose clean some old newspapers out of her basement. Now they were hauling the papers to the recycling bin at the supermarket. For the job, Ruth Rose borrowed her little brother Nate's wagon. Is this a mistake? Are we doing this for real?
Are we? Are we doing this for real? That's up to you.
It feels like a mistake.
Oh no. Sure, it's a fine book. You will have to deal with a character named Dink the entire time.
A character named Dink is a... I did give him an annoying voice.
How about this? First chapter. See how you feel. Don't have to stick with it.
Okay.
Yeah.
How long is a chapter?
Pages? The kids' books has got to be like short. Hold on. I can look. Looks like 11 pages.
I can do that.
Okay.
It was early August and the sky was filled with cotton candy clouds. The kids wore shorts and t-shirts. Ruth Rose liked to dress all in one color. Her shorts and shirt were sky blue. They matched her eyes, headband, and sneakers. The kids crossed Main Street in front of the supermarket. Almost there, Dink said, struggling to keep the tower of papers from toppling. A drop of sweat fell from the tip of his nose. Dink's real name was Donald David Duncan. Donald David Duncan. Most people called him Dink, except his mother when she was annoyed with him. The kids tugged the wagon to a row of tall wooden bins at the side of the supermarket. Each bin was labeled according to what was being recycled, and one was for newspapers. Dink pulled open the door, and the kids began tossing bundles of papers inside. Boy, was that hard work, Josh announced when they were finished. He grabbed the wagon handle. Let's go inside and get something to drink. Dink and Ruth Rose followed Josh into the supermarket. The automatic door swished open, and they were immediately bathed in cool air. They found a machine in the frozen food section, and each bought a cold soda. Guys, look, Josh whispered. He tipped his soda can toward the meat counter. A few customers waited while a butcher sliced steaks. Why are you looking at steaks? Dink asked. You're always thinking of your next meal, Josh, said Ruth Rose. No, I mean the guy standing there, Josh said. He pointed at a man dressed completely in black. His slicked-back hair was also black. His skin was ghostly pale. Dark sunglasses were perched above his long nose. I wonder who he is, Josh said. I've never seen him in Greenlawn before. I haven't either, Dink said. But so what? I don't know everybody in town. Ruth Rose peeked over a display of frozen chickens to get a better look. Something about him looks familiar, she said. Do you know what he looks like to me? Josh asked. A man buying meat? Dink said. Josh shook his head. No, he looks like a vampire. Dink grinned at Josh. Have you ever seen a vampire, Josh? He asked. No, but I know what they look like, Josh pointed toward the man. Vampires have skinny lips and really pale skin, like him. Ruth Rose laughed. Your skin is pale. Are you a vampire? She asked. I am not pale, Josh said. I have freckles. The man strolled away from the meat counter. Let's follow him, Josh said. Why? Dink asked. Because he's weird, Josh said. Who wears sunglasses inside a store? Wow, this kid's very judgmental. Sometimes I wear sunglasses in stores because it's bright outside. You weren't aware of the skinny lips aspect of vampire lore? Me either. I didn't catch that at first. Vampires have skinny lips and really pale skin, like him. They also have, like, little widow's peak hair, which I do not have. So I can't be a vampire.
Would you want to be?
Maybe. They make it look cool in that one show. You know the one I'm talking about. Vampire Diaries.
Yes.
That's the one.
I was gonna be content with Vampire the show.
That'd do it.
Yeah.
Guys, we have to go home from our newspapers, Ruth Rose said. My mom is paying us, remember? We can do that later, Josh said, finishing his drink. Come on, the guy's leaving. Shaking their heads, Dink and Ruth Rose followed Josh, who took off after the man. Suddenly, the man stopped in the doorway. He turned and seemed to stare right at the three kids. Ooh, look at that. Actually, he's kind of handsome.
Yeah, he kind of. We can work with that.
The store lights reflected off his glasses like tiny lightning bolts. The man smiled and nodded at the kids. This is gonna be another one where the vampire doesn't talk at all. This is bullshit. Dink, Josh, and Ruth Rose
Human
first.
vampire. Sorry.
I wanna do the voice.
Hold on, I'll look ahead. You keep reading.
Okay. The man in black shoved the door open and walked out. Oh my gosh, Josh whispered. He saw us following him. No, he saw you following him, Rose said. I'm going home to help my mom. The guy is pretty strange, Dink said. I got goosebumps when he looked at us. That's because it's air conditioned in here, Rose said. Can we go now? I want to see where he's going, Josh said. Crouching, he pulled the wagon through the door. Dink and Ruth Rose were right behind him, laughing. The stranger made his way down Main Street. The kid stayed behind him. Suddenly, he disappeared inside a doorway. He's gone into Ellie's, Josh said. Gee, I didn't know vampires ate real food, Dink cracked. Don't they just drink blood? Josh ignored Dink. We're going in, too, Josh said. But let's wait a couple of minutes. We don't want to look like we're following him. But we are, Ruth Rose pointed out. Well, we don't have to advertise it, Josh said. Let's just get ice cream like we usually do. The kids left the wagon outside and pushed through the door to Ellie's diner. Ellie had her back to them. The kids glanced around at all the seats. The man in black was nowhere to be seen. Where'd he go? Josh whispered. Are you sure he came in here? Dink asked. Maybe he went into the pet shop next door. I know he came in here, Josh said. He peeked under a booth. Let's ask Ellie. Ask me what? Ellie asked. She turned around just as she finished sticking a small, round band-aid on the side of her neck. Ellie, no! She's been bitten! So that's the first chapter. I don't know if we want to continue with this.
So two things.
Two things.
One, I don't know if he ever talks, but he does get a name.
Uh-huh.
Secondly, this feels like My Immortal.
No! Really?
Certain things that it just kind of feels that way. Just from the first chapter. Could always read My Immortal.
That seems like it would be its own
oh, that's its own reward later
that's its
on.
own
That's
reward
not
tier.
tonight. That's not tonight.
Honestly, the Game Grumps read it on their Patreon, and that would be cheating to steal off of them.
I don't think it's stealing, and I don't think it's cheating. Because the way you do it's going to be different.
Is it? Is it going to be any different?
It's going to be different.
It's My Immortal. How would be different could it be?
You have different voices. You are a voice talent. It's different. Yeah, the not to spoil this riveting book of a different caliber. Sorry if A to Z Mysteries is your all-time favorite. The vampire's name is Dr. Kula, C-U-L-A.
Yes! That's fucking amazing.
Really good.
Dr. Cool.
Yeah, I don't think he says a single word in this entire book.
God damn it. When are the vampires gonna get speaking roles in film?
Give vampires speaking roles.
Well, I don't really feel interested. If I don't get to do the voice, I don't feel interested in continuing the book.
feel like that's very fair. I also feel very let down that, like, you name someone Dr. Kula, which would make a great soda name, by the way, and you don't give him a single lick of dialogue.
Okay, here's... Oh, okay. There's
You jump into Vampire Academy?
There's Vampire Academy. There's Runaway Vampire. And that's that.
Yep.
The
Lindsay
person on the
Sanders,
cover is...
absolutely read that one. Yep. That's the one.
Vampire Weekend, which I'm pretty sure is a band.
Okay. Hear me out. Have you ever read Vampire Kisses?
No, what is Vampire Kisses?
Okay, so I read the entire series when I was in high school,
Uh-huh.
and it's very cute. Because what it is this, it's a town literally called Dullsville,
Yeah.
and it's a girl and a vampire who's like very much a vampire in the beginning, who has all the classical like movie markers of being a vampire.
Yeah.
It ends up being like just a very cute series of romance stories.
Okay.
They are peak 2000-ish cringe.
Fantastic.
You don't have to read those on stream. You should at least read the first one because they're just fun. They're ridiculous. The highest stakes is prom, you know? Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
In a
Sometimes
small
you just need
town
that.
dubbed Dollsville, 16-year-old Raven, a vampire-crazed goth girl, is an outcast, but not for long. The intriguing
his
and
name's-
rumored to be haunted mansion on top of Benson Hill has stood vacant and boarded up for years. It is until its mysterious, strange new occupants move in. Who are these creepy people? Especially the handsome, dark, and elusive Alexander Sterling. Alexander Sterling? That's what we went with?
That's what we went with!
Does the town prattle actually ring true? Are they vampires? Raven, who secretly covets a vampire kiss, both at the risk of her own mortality and Alexander's loving trust, is dying to uncover the truth. How long is it?
I wish Libby would tell you from this screen. Hold on, I'll check it out.
Vampire kisses, kissing coffins,
I'll read it
Vampireville,
again.
Dance with a Vampire, The Coffin Club. I mean, I have 20 loans. I can just loan it endlessly.
It's going to be too long for a stream considering the audiobook is 5 hours.
Woof.
Yeah. I have to place a
Look
hold.
up In the Forest of the Night.
People are reading this too? Well, they should.
In the Forest of the Night, restless and looking for excitement, Isabel is seduced by the brooding caretaker of her uncle's estate, Will Sage. Becoming lovers, she receives a racy sexual Okay!
Is this the same book to say?
Is this... am I allowed to read this on Twitch? Till she's caught bare-assed with her lover. Will is banished from the estate, and Isabel is thrown into deviant but proper world of English society, where gentlemen take advantage of her lusty nature and destroy her reputation. What is this?
I'm dying. Help.
Wrong author? Wrong author!
It's okay, Dazay. This is a safe place. I'm not gonna try.
It looks like nothing comes up in the Forest of the Night. It's in the Forests of the Night. Yeah, nothing comes up, unfortunately.
Something did, but...
The other one was written and published when the author was like 15. Oh, that's definitely a different author.
Different, yeah.
Let's see. Does my favorite... One of my favorite books is that... Place hold. Does that mean that someone else has it? Good. Good. Someone else should be reading this. Can I find out who? Can we be friends? Libby, tell me who else is reading this book.
Libby's not gonna tell you.
Pewter. Fastest way to make friends. No highways. Pewter.
I'm kind of mad because my library doesn't have NPCs.
What else by Drew Hayes do they have? Oh, they have. Oh. So one of my favorite authors, Drew Hayes, actually does a vampire story called Fred the Vampire Accountant. It looks like they only have number 4 in the series of Fred the Vampire Accountant.
Oh, wild.
It's actually a really great urban fantasy book.
One thing you can do next time you're in the physical building of your library,
yeah,
is ask the people there if you guys have partner libraries on Libby. Because that's something my library does, where we have a bunch of other libraries throughout the state that we can connect our Libby to.
Yeah.
It helps us cast that net much wider.
Okay.
It's nice. Yeah.
Does sound nice. What is everybody else's favorite author? We can look up people's favorite authors and see what books are available. Spice, what's your favorite author's name?
Why
Andrew
you gotta put me on the spot like that? I mean, the easy answer for me is going to be Tolkien, but that's... Is that the truth?
Is it the truth?
I'm having a crisis about this right now.
2, Unit 3, Chicago. From director. Importance critical. Subject specimen retrieval. This is from Andrew Vox, called Blackjack. Target. Shadowy hunter-killer teams. ID'd via signature kills worldwide. Identify only by skull spine removal from victims. No witnesses, no forensic, no particular race targeted. On rare occasions, scraps of what appear to be playing cards found at murder sites. Objective. Locate and capture any member of such teams. Must be taken alive for study and observation. Authorization approved for use of outside contractor. Individual ID'd as Ross and his team. A pure mercenary outfit, well known throughout criminal underworld. No inside informants available. Ruthless, undeterred by risk, rumored never to fail, but under no circumstance to be trusted. No known political or social objective. It's proven treacherous when retained by government in the past. Update. Ross and his team claim to have identified a pattern to the signature kills. Believe they can predict a forthcoming strike. They're prepared to personally confront and capture, but financial arrangement alone not sufficient. What you describe as a get-out-of-jail card is hereby approved. Okay. You have a sleepy sardine on your back? If you die here, remember you?
That sounds like a good death. I mean, you live there now.
Yeah, of all the ways to go, that's one of them.
Pretty good one.
Taken out by a wild sardine. This was from the Cross series. You didn't read that one. You did the Burke novels, though, and the Batman one. Oh, I don't know if... Doesn't look like we have the Batman one. That's How I Roll. Andrew Vox, the master of hard-boiled fiction, returns with a new novel about an assassin whose love forced him to kill his own conscience. You did That's How I Roll too? It was good? Very nice. Hey, I'm about to sneeze? Gonna sneeze? Did we ever read any of... Thank you. Did we ever read any of the Billy Chaka novels? No, who's Billy Chaka? Let's see what's available on Libby. Are you talking about transfrontier conservation areas, Dane?
You know Dane.
Oh, Isaac Adamson is the author. It looks like Libby doesn't have any of these available. Searching for his missing brother in Prague, an American encounters a world of killers, gangsters, and ancient mysteries in a satisfyingly twisted tale called Complication. What do you say? Let's see. We made it to 11 o'clock. Do we just call it a night here, folks? Do we... Or, I guess...
I've done a lot of speaking tonight.
It has been exhausting.
Mm-hmm. Balatro. Dane's on it.
Dane, I had a really good flush run earlier. I got to the final ante. And I was 1,000 points short on a flush. And I didn't get a final... I failed. I lost the run. But, yeah, I guess, do we just call it a night? Do we cozy up next to the fire? It might have started snowing.
You should go check.
Your friend's on day 20 of his 25-hour stream? That's pretty awesome.
20? Wow.
Why 25 hours instead of 24 hours? Like, what, I know that when we did, because you mistyped, okay. No worries, I do it all the time. I'm gonna bring up Drew Hayes again because it's like... Looks like they only have the audiobooks as well. It's kind of a bummer. Anyway, you want snow, Dane? I'm excited for the snow. I'm not excited for all the people freaking out about the snow. I'm sure it's going to be a disaster. But I'm not going to drive anywhere. These say we need to raid out, so if you want to drop your friend who's doing the 24-hour stream, we can go raid them and bring them some energy. Let's see. Oh wait, I can just go to gameplay. Turn off the capture. Not the window capture, the display capture. He's doing Minecraft right now? That seems like fun. Drop y'all off with them. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming out to the Bunnicula stream. I really appreciated that.
Thank you for doing a Bunnicula stream.
You were watching until I popped up for the read and it was dual windowing? Nice. I'm glad y'all had a good time. It really was, I was very nervous about getting started with it, about reading on stream for the first time. Dane, thank you for the bits. For those of you who have been around for a really long time with the stream, will know this, but other people who are just coming in probably don't know that I actually started out as a voice actor before I started streaming, and the whole idea was to voice act for books, was to read books, do audiobooks, and then promote them with the stream, but I just ended up streaming. Spice, thank you for the bits. But yeah, so it was nerve-wracking to get back to my roots with this, reading Bunnicula. So I'm glad y'all had a good time. I appreciate the support. Gonna do some raid messages.
So what you're saying is maybe more of this in the future?
We might, if we can finagle doing more. That would be a fun. I had a feeling you had distinct character voices and maintained them well. Thank you very much. I was super worried about that. I know I did the two kid voices a little too close together. I was trying to keep them kind of similar, but I think I maybe just did the same voice twice. But I definitely was doing my best to make distinct voices for everybody, so I appreciate that. Also an incredible GM. Aw, thank you, Dane.
It's true, he's right.
That's very kind of you to say.
Also, it was a cold read.
It was a cold read. I've never read the book before.
Yeah.
The main cast is the pets, so we nailed it. I wish Bunnicula had some speaking roles, damn it. The closest we got was the note that said, "Take care of my little Bonnie." I was so brokenhearted that I didn't get to do the vampire voice more. My favorite voice.
Even in the TV show, he doesn't speak, apparently.
There's a TV show?
There's a TV show, yeah.
Hold on, I'm looking this up.
I haven't watched it.
It's an animated TV series.
104 episodes?
There's no way there's 104 episodes.
There's 104 episodes. 3 seasons, 104 episodes. Ran on the Cartoon Network. It's starting in 2016, ended in 2018.
It's that recent?
Yeah.
It looks like it's on Amazon Prime.
Ooh.
It looks cute.
Yeah, I've seen some GIFs from it, but I haven't haven't gone deeper than that.
I've been listening to the fire crackling for the past 3 hours now, and I just turned it off, and the silence is deafening.
Turn it back on.
Turn it back on. Turn it back on.
Turn it back on! Can't go through a snowy night and not have the fireplace.
It is actually crazy warm in my room right now. We're living it. I guess that's just because we
do have a fire.
You say that, my computer is pretty hot. Although we didn't do anything too strenuous, so I guess it's not that up. Just a little warm.
What's the most graphics intensive game you have? You can...
Probably God of War, Ragnarok.
There you go. Use it like a space heater.
Just vrooming my graphics card. Bunnicula is an American animated television show from Warner Bros. Animation developed by Jessica Barutsky, produced by Barutsky and Maxwell Adams. Oh, isn't Maxwell Adams the one who did, like, all of our childhood? Like, Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy? After moving to New Orleans with her father and pets, Chester and Harold, Mina Monroe is left with a key given to her by her late Aunt Marie that she uses to open a cellar in the Orlock Apartments. Doing this frees a vampire rabbit named Bunnicula who drains vegetables instead of blood to strengthen his powers. Unaware of his traits, she adopts him and makes him a new member of the Monroe family. The series is mostly set with Chester and Harold joining Bunnicula in his supernatural adventures involving situations only he can solve. It's set New Orleans! Fuck yeah!
Well, now you have to watch it.
Can I get the
Still,
first
there's-
episode?
What
Can we
happened
watch
to
it?
the Monroes?
Well, it looks like...
Oh, it is Mina.
But Mina is
Not in the books.
not in the books. Mina, it looks to be like the same age as Toby and Pete.
It feels like they kind of Beetlejuiced it, and I'm not mad about that.
How long were the episodes? There's 3 seasons that amounts to 104 episodes, which is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, 40 episodes a season, it's got to be 15 minutes. There's no way that's full feature-length episodes, right? Running time 10 to 11 minutes. Okay.
Okay. That was kind of the era for that too. Like even Over the Garden Wall was just that 10-15 minute range.
Chester in the series is a Siamese cat. I don't think they call him that anymore.
Chester's also voiced by Sean Astin.
Yes.
Chester is Samwise.
Chester is Samwise. Confirmed.
Oh my god. It's amazing.
Can we watch the first episode on Twitch without getting demonetized?
It's an old enough show. Who's gonna come find it?
Oh, well, when you say it's an old enough show, it's only 6 years old.
In internet time, that means like 60 years.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, wouldn't it only like block out the last portion of the stream if it does that?
It would probably mute it on... I don't know what it does on YouTube. But I don't have... I'm actually not publishing this VOD because I was worried about the... At least I'm not publishing it on Twitch. I'm fine with publishing it on YouTube. I want to watch it. I want to watch it now.
Okay. No, that's only a 1-minute clip from the Warner Brothers page. Dang it.
Could also do audio only on Discord. We could watch it on Discord.
Good. I mean, if you're not archiving it to begin with, then I feel like there's no rules, no consequences.
I don't know. Like, people watch anime and shit on top of their streams all the time, right? Like, that's shit that's actively coming out. This would be... Let's see if there's anything on YouTube for it. Bunnicula, full episodes, let's go! 1 million views from 5 years ago from Boomerang UK. It's only 3 minutes long.
Is it the full episode then?
I don't think so. It's gotta be a short.
It's at least a good teaser for later.
Ah, shit! That's so loud. End stream, start again. Watch episode. That way you're only out 10 minutes. If you had After Dark, that's what you would have done if you had After Dark streams.
Yeah, certainly the Dane After Dark stream never happened.
Let's fuck it. Let's.
I don't know what I was expecting from a Bunnicula cartoon.
It wasn't that. I can tell you that much. It was not that. Maya sculpting is an ancient white person pastime, Dane. We have spiced mayo. We have spiced mayo where I come from. Look, a
Spiced
1990s
mayo?
Bunnicula cartoon would have been way different. Yeah, you don't add spices to your mayo?
I don't use mayo.
Well, it's a decent enough condiment, especially when you add some spices to it, like sriracha.
I mean, okay. Oh, okay. I do use sriracha mayo. You got me there.
Okay. That was a wild. It also was just the opening of the episode, I'm guessing.
Like a weird supercut.
What is?
And not Dane with the hear me out.
Why is there? Why is it only like the first half of the episode? Why cut it there? They're only 10-minute episodes. Why not just have the full episode?
It's just enough to get the fan artists.
I guess. I mean, it is also enough to make me interested in watching the full episode.
Oh, that's working.
All right.
You're kind of upset, but you're also really excited to watch every single episode of Bunnicula now.
Yeah. For Christmas, Ashwood would like a Bunnicula box set. I'm not against it.
How much does that cost?
Okay. Dise, can you put the name of the person who's doing their 24-hour stream again, so that I could copy and paste it into the Raid network? Raid network. Raid Shadowless.
Raid network. There might not be a box set. You can buy season 1 on DVD.
I'm gonna put the raid messages up again. Thank you everybody for being here. I hope you had a good time. This was a lot of fun, especially getting to do the reading along with you all. Yeah, I'm glad we did that. I'm glad we raised money for the Wildlife Recovery Fund or Wildlife Relief Fund. It's a W, it's an R and an F.
I think it's recovery.
That's all I know. But we appreciate you, and we hope to see you soon. And we will catch you next time. We What was I gonna say, Spice?
You love them, all your lads, ladies, and gentle non-bees.
Yes. Stay fancy, all my lads, ladies, and gentle zombies. Keep being amazing. We know things are not ideal at the moment. We're glad that you took the time to be a part of this stream. Thus, we hope you had a great time, and we hope to see you again soon. That's all I got for you. We're gonna raid out, and we will catch you next time, which will be maybe tonight. Who knows? Maybe Tuesday. Anyway, love you all bunches.